Hi, this is Trevor Conquergood. Welcome to this week's RNK Software Club's video for the week, and the topic for this week is going to be about sketching with the Sketch A Stitch tool. And as you can see, I have all my Floriani software open and available. And so anybody who's purchased Sketch A Stitch, whether you purchased it standalone or maybe you've purchased it as an add-on to the Floriani main software, the FTCU, or maybe you have purchased the new sort of universal bundle that includes both, FTC, includes basically everything you can see on my screen right now. What we're really talking about is found here under this little paintbrush right up here. If I click on it, it opens up the Sketch A Stitch widget, and this little widget is how you use the new kind of interface that we call Sketch A Stitch. Essentially, this is the brush selector. Once you click on that, it shows you all the different styles of embroidery that you could create. If you choose tapered ends and you click and you drag, you'll get a column, and that column will have kind of like a tapered or a pointy end to it. If you choose calligraphy, then you'll click and drag to draw a line, and it'll have a thicker side and a thinner side to it, like a calligraphy pen, and so on it kind of goes with the different styles of embroidery. And I know I looked in the RNK Software Club, and there were quite a few videos that go through the basics of how to use Sketch A Stitch. And so I thought for today what I could really try and focus on was a bit of a sketching demonstration. And there's really lots of different styles of embroidery that you could create using these tools. We've got applique tools, we've got fill tools. Now when I click and drag a shape, it fills it in with thread. And so when I do sketches, and we're going to talk about this rose today and how I made it, this little sketch, it's called the grand opening, and it's been sort of sketched using the Sketch A Stitch tool. I used the Run Stitch tool. So when I click on Run Stitch, notice when I click and drag, the software creates a line, and it will sew forward, 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 kind of like the straight stitch of a sewing machine. And so what I'm actually going to do is just click on New to create a new empty workspace and kind of go right from the beginning on this to show you how I created that design of the rose. And so really, to get started, what I need to do is click on the tool for backdrop, because I did not sketch that rose from my mind. I'm not really an illustrator. I need something to follow. Now, fortunately for me, I have some people that are good at drawing in my family, and so the rose actually was drawn by my wife, Floriani Conquergood. And so if I look on my desktop here, there's the original photograph of her pencil sketch. And so I've taken a photo, like with my phone, my iPhone, and I've emailed it to myself and saved it to my desktop so that I could use the backdrop tool and bring it in. I guess if you need help with, how to take a picture with your phone and email it to yourself, you could write to us, but you might find that there's some helpful people in your family that are handy with the iPhone or the, different methods of getting a picture that you took onto your computer. But essentially this is simply a JPEG image of a drawing that my wife made. And if I look at it really closely, you can completely see that it's really just made up of little dots of black and white and gray, and it's a drawing. Now, when I put it onto my screen, right away the size is kind of a question. And let's see, I'm going to right click on the ruler and change it on over to inches so that we can see that this drawing is currently 16 inches tall and 16 wide and 22 inches tall. And I don't know about you, but that's bigger than my embroidery hoops. If I click here, that'll put an embroidery hoop on my screen. If I click on this tool, it allows me to select a hoop. Now I can tell the software which kind of machine, which format that I'm going to be using. If you've got a Genome, you pick Jeff. If you've got a Brother Baby Lock, you pick PES. And you guys will know which format you take, VP3 for Viking, etc., right? Well, when I choose PES, then my list of hoops are hoops that were pre-made and the ones that exist for the, Brother Baby Lock machines. And so put your biggest hoop on your screen. And by the way, you can make your own hoops if I've never told you that before. If you've bought your own custom hoops for your machines, you can make them and add them to your sort of list so that you can pull them up. So there's like a nice big embroidery hoop, and as you can see, the rose simply does not fit. Even if I rotate that hoop to be going kind of vertically like that, still too big. And so if your picture's too big or if it's too small, the way you resize it is actually to click back on the tool that you use to insert it, the backdrop tool. When you click on the backdrop tool, it will select whatever backdrop is on your screen. And now you've got little handy dandy handles that you can use to resize that picture. If you want to make it a specific size, you can actually come in the properties box and say exactly how tall you want it. Right now, my picture is 7.8 inches. If I wanted to make it 9 inches tall, I can just type in 9 and hit enter or apply on the keyboard. And so essentially you need to size the artwork to the size that you want your finished embroidery to be. It's not that you can't resize the embroidery that you create later, but I do find that it's helpful to me when I sketch the stitching in the first place if I have it set to the correct size so that I know how much sort of space there is for sketching. In other words, if you sketched it at the original 22-inch size and you were really planning on sewing it at 9, you may sketch more lines than there's really room for. So I size the artwork and I place it on my screen. Now, to get started, I'm going to turn on the tool, and this is the tool here. Another thing I might do before I even do that is currently I have my favorite workspace, which, as you know, has the sequence view and the properties box side by side. And I work on kind of a small laptop, and so I often do things that is meant to give me more sort of space in my workspace. Because when I get it all the way I like it, I don't have much room for sketching in here. So what I'm trying to tell you is I've closed some of my toolbars and made a new workspace. So look, if I click under toolbars, scroll down to workspace where it says sketching. This is me creating a workspace that had more area for working so that I have less. I didn't open. Look under toolbars. Several of the toolbars have been unchecked. I turned them off. When I'm sketching, I don't tend to need them. So what I'm saying is I've created more space for the sketching area. Now here's the real trick of it. When I sketch, I need to be closer than 37% zoomed in. I need to be closer than 100% zoomed in. Now, it's not that you can't sketch at 100% because you can. You can take your line and draw all day long at 100%. It's just if you're going to try and trace along these lines, it's harder to be accurate when you're zoomed out like this. And so you can see that I'm still able to trace those lines, but if I zoom nice and close, I might be disappointed that I wasn't as accurate as I wanted to be. And so the truth is I normally zoom in somewhere between 200% and up to as far as 400%. And at times, for really small things, I might even go in as far as 600%. When I'm at 600%, I can be very accurate and trace my lines. The only thing is I can't see nearly as much of the picture at any one time. And so keep that in mind that I will, if you're wondering how I'm, zooming right now, I have my hand on a mouse, and that mouse has a wheel. When I scroll the wheel away from me, we get closer to the embroidery, and when I scroll the wheel towards me, we get further away, and it'll go to wherever I put my mouse. So if I put the cursor there and scroll away, I go to that spot, zoom back out, put my cursor down here, scroll in. And so I can use that to navigate around the screen. There's really a number of ways to navigate around the screen. Another one might be that you could get zoomed in to the zoom percentage that you like. And then if you want to move over, if you click on your space bar, notice that my cursor became a hand. And I can use that to click and drag and move. And if I hit the space bar again, I'm back to my kind of like selecting tool. And so that's another way, one way or another, you're going to need to work closer. This is really the main sort of hint I'm giving you, is that I like to sketch around 300%. Now, Sketch A Stitch works with whatever you own. I'm currently using a mouse, but I do have a touchscreen computer, and that means I can reach out with my finger and draw with my finger on the screen as well. This is my finger. I guess I'll need to click on the tool and choose one of the brushes, and now I'm drawing with my finger, and now I'm putting my finger down, and I'm picking up my mouse, and I'm drawing with my mouse. I also have a pen, so because I have a touchscreen, I've purchased a pen that goes with it, and I can also draw with said pen. And so it doesn't really matter what you draw with, but you may find that some are more easy, because what we're doing is tracing now. Before I do any more tracing, here I'm just going to select those lines and delete them. What I will do is change the color. Even if you're planning on doing a blue embroidery, what I'm usually looking for is a color that will give me some contrast, that will make it easy to see. So oftentimes I find on a picture like this, I might work on red, I might work on yellow, I might work with hot pink, something like that, so that when I draw that line, I have a chance to see where it's going. And so by doing like the hot pink here, it kind of helps a little bit. And so I'm just tracing along the lines. And one of the things I love about the Sketch A Stitch is the little black dot. I know a lot of people, they first get Sketch A Stitch and they're like, where'd this little black dot come from? Well, if you look in the preferences on the tab for Sketch A Stitch, there is an option to show the last stitch marker, and you don't have to have that turned on, but if you don't, it's harder to know where you left off. You see, that's where I left off, and if I move here, now I left off right there, and if I leave that show last stitch marker turned on, that's a great thing. Now there's another preference in there I want to talk about, and it's the generate starts and stops as drawn. Sometimes I turn that off because I don't want the software to change my stitching. If I turn that off, then it'll always start wherever I start. So if I start over here and go up to there, the software has to jump to get from, where I left off to where I began. If I start right here and keep on going, then there's no jump because I've started where I left off, and that's how you can create a continuous line of embroidery. But if you turn this on, the software can find the closest point to join. In other words, if I started a new line and my new line started here, but at some point in that line it walked closer to the exit point of the previous line, the software would learn the closest place to join, and it would connect here, it would walk to the end of the line, and then walk to the beginning of the line. And that's a cool thing. However, when I do some of my sketches, I'm concerned that if I do a sketch and I leave it like this and I start my line off, I may want it to start right here, but if I started right there but I happen to sketch closer at any point, it may jump to a different place in the line, and what that does is it makes part of the line a 2-ply, part of the line a single ply. So it is a good thing. However, sometimes I like it off because I don't want the software to ever adjust that entry and exit point. And in other words, even if I've sketched a whole bunch around here, I only want it to be 1 ply, and it doesn't matter where the closest point to the previous exit is because I sketched close enough in the beginning. But I don't want any of that squiggle to be part 2-ply, part 1-ply. And that's why there's a setting in here called generate start stops as drawn, and a lot of times when I'm sketching, I will turn that off. Now that I've got all my settings the way I like it, I can click on all items and click delete to clean up my workspace and then get started. Now, another thing I might decide is, where am I going to start and where am I going to finish, and does it matter? It doesn't really matter, but I usually just try and find the center of the design. And so, if this is sort of like the top and that's the bottom, then here on my ruler where it says 0 and it says 0, that's like the center of the hoop. So right there is the center of the hoop. So that's usually where I start. It's not a rule, but why not? So I figure out kind of where I want to start approximately. So there's the 0, there's the 0. It's literally right around the point of this, it's actually over here on this one, isn't it? It's right there. And so sure, I'll start right there. Now, notice I'm 240% zoomed in, and that's not wrong. If you want to get closer, scroll one more time. Also not wrong. But somewhere in there is where I'm going to start. Now, I'm going to pick up my pen instead of my mouse because it feels a little more natural. And I'll select the run stitch, and I'll select the color in case I haven't got it already selected. So I'll select, a pink or a yellow or something like that. Try and put my pen down approximately where I saw, and I'll walk up to the end of the line like that. Here, I can turn on 3D so it makes it a little bit more findable when I have the 3D turned on. There, so you can see what I just drew. That's it. We started our design. And to get going again, we're going to click on the pencil and click on the brush selector and select the brush. Now, that won't need to be done every time. In other words, I can draw, more of this line and rest, and it's ready for me to go again. I can pick up the next line, draw up here, down here, and etc., etc. Just keep drawing. There's no rules at this point. It's a tool that, if you draw north and south, it'll go north and south. If you draw east and west, it'll go east and west. If you draw circles, it'll draw circles. If I don't like what I drew, I can hit undo. If I draw something and I'm like, oh, I missed and my line went off the line, I can fix it later, right? I can either undo and resketch it, or at some point, at any point, I can select that line. And when I have the line that I just drew selected, I could use the tool just below select is the shape tool. And when you click on shape, it actually shows you the points that make up your lines, and it gives you, for every point, there's also tangents that are used to create the curvature of that line. And so if I put the tangents and the point for that line just in the right spot, I can easily fix the line to be exactly as it was. Now, I always like to point out to people, I went way off the line there. But if you go off the line by a little bit and you're zoomed in 481%, that's like, if I miss by 1 millimeter at 481%, it's like missing by 1/4, even 1/5 of a millimeter, you guys. In other words, you're fussing over nothing, and don't worry about it, because when you zoom out to actual size, you would never see that. And so keep that in mind, that when you zoom in this close to work, you're absolutely allowed to be a little messy. Now, like I said, I might try and set it around 300. That's a nice number. See how at 300 I can see most of the top of that rose? And so that's kind of how I do it, is I set the size, I set the screen where it is, and I sketch what I can see in that area. And when I'm done sketching that area, we move on. And so I can see the top of this rose and most of it, maybe just not quite the right-hand side. And so that's kind of how I would start out. I would, pick up my brush again, turn on the tool, click on the run stitch one more time. We're ready to sketch. And I usually sketch along these lines at least 2 plies, but sometimes I'll go back and forth 3 times, sometimes 4 times. I mean, first of all, it's a sketch. Who's to say what's right and what's wrong? I will point out that what you can't see right now is my personal body. And because of the way that I have my computer set up right now, this is not as comfortable as it could be. In other words, I'm working on a laptop. I've got a microphone in front of my face, and my laptop the screen of my laptop is probably about 2.5, 3 feet away from my waist. And so what happens is, when I draw with my pen, I feel like Frankenstein, because my arms are stretched out almost to the length of my arm, you guys. And what I'm trying to tell you right now is, comfort matters. So if I was to take this computer, move the microphone out of the way, and bring the laptop closer to the edge of the desk, I could tuck my elbows into my waist. And then I'm drawing with my hand movements instead of my arm movements. So that makes, when I use my hand, it's going to be a lot more accurate and a lot more natural feeling to me. Now at this point, there's a lot of different sketching techniques that you can come up with. So for example, here I'm drawing a line and I want to make it thicker, and so I walk along a little bit, then I walk backwards a little bit, walk along a little further, or walk backwards a little further, and walk along a little further and backwards. And so I'm doing what's known as a 3-ply, but rather than doing every stitch 3-ply, I'm doing a length of the line, back, forward again, a length of the line, back, forward again, and it gives me a thicker line, and it also allows me to give it a little bit of width, and part of me says, if I'm creating a sketch style design, isn't it supposed to be a little on the sketchy side anyways? And so that's totally fine, and the point here is, let her fly. Here, let's go undo and undo. And so where's my last point? Oh, there's the black dot right there. And so, just start sketching and don't feel quite as compelled to follow the lines perfectly. It's still going to look like my rose at the end of the day. Except for it's not my rose. Really, it's my honey's rose. Lorna, she drew the rose. I'm simply resketching Lorna's sketch. But as you can see here, I've kind of done all the parts that were on my screen. And then what I would do is I would maybe put down my pen, pick back up my mouse, move over here and go nudge, 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 and move the screen down so that I can see, okay, now I'm going to go from here down to there. And so I'll pick up my pen again, put it back down, and sketch that line, and back and down, and then over here and down, and another line and down here, and then up and down and up and down and rest. If you don't like it, undo. If you do, great. And this is me sketching. I've done a ton of sketches for you guys. You've seen them in almost every month of the RNK Club since I started as the manager here, which is going on 2.5 years now. I've tried to do a new sketch for you guys almost every month, and essentially this is what I'm doing, you guys. You need to find a picture. Sometimes it's a picture that somebody drew. Sometimes it's from clip art. I'll actually work from a nice line drawing and sketch it. Sometimes I'll work from a photograph and sketch it. Photographs are a little harder because the lines aren't clear to you. You may have to decide, where is that line and how many windows can I really put in that building? Is one of the questions I often ask myself. How much is too much? And so if you're wondering to yourself, how much is too much? How many lines can I put in this area? When have I sketched too much? One of my tricks is to actually sketch a little piece of fill. So choose the fill tool and just draw yourself a little piece of fill. Now you can see, okay, at 100% density, this is how close those lines are. So when I'm sketching, if they're that far apart, they're certainly not too close together, and I haven't sketched too much. Sometimes it is entirely possible to sketch more than what you intended. A lot of times it's because we don't recognize the size, and you think that in the area of that leaf, maybe I'll zoom in on this little section of the line here and move forward. So click on my run stitch and start up there again and just draw down here. But if I went back and forth along this line like 25 times, there does become a point where maybe that is too much and it could get kind of dense. So that's where I say you can make a little piece of fill to kind of give you an idea of, okay, that's how many stitches and how close they are to make like solid embroidery. So if I want to make a line that looks solid, I can go there and back and there and back. And that's kind of like, the similar kind of spacing that had. Solid. So this is really it. If you want to do lettering, well, pick your pen up wherever you want to put it down and draw along the line, connect to the R, maybe come down over to this R, into the A, into the N. I usually try and go to the end, and then once I get to the end, I work on my way back to the middle again, and I catch any parts that I didn't catch on the first time, but you're just following backwards along that line. Whoops, I missed that piece the first time. I probably should have got it. And here I can do like a little extra piece like that, whatever. and that's me sketching somebody's hand stitching. Like I said, if you get right into the end and you're like, oh, that doesn't have the right shape, you can select it, use your shape tool, come in here and try and find those points and move them around until they give you exactly the sort of look that you're looking for. So that's a little lesson in the Sketch A Stitch software, you guys. It is a great companion to the FTCU software. So what I have found, a lot of times, I maybe just need a shape. I'll click on Sketch A Stitch. I'll come over here. I'll take my run stitch. I'll sketch off my shape real quick. Then I'll select that shape. But if I really wanted a motif line, or if I really wanted a solid standard fill or something, I can still do that. So it doesn't matter that I sketched it with Sketch A Stitch. It's still a shape that can then be converted into any style of embroidery that you might want to put in there. So that's something. And I've also find that sometimes when I'm doing some of my sketches, I get to a spot in the design where I want to be really accurate. Maybe it is the lettering, and I want to go, and instead of using my Sketch A Stitch tool, I'll put the Sketch A Stitch tool down, and I'll go to the regular digitizing tool, and I'll choose a run stitch. And now I can go click and click and click and click and click and click to draw my sketching, as opposed to click and drag. And so, yes, the click, click, click method takes a little bit longer and a few more clicks to do, but it does give me the full level of control over my cursor to what I'm drawing, and that may be just exactly what you're looking for. And so what I'm telling you is that I often, when I do my sketches, come to an area that needs to be really precise. Like maybe there's a clock in the sketch, and I really want to make sure that the hours of the clock, go the right way. And so I'll stop and I'll go click, 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 and I'll do those ones really precise like this. Here, if I right click, you see I drew a line. So click, 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 click is your regular digitizing tool. The brush, the Sketch A Stitch tool is click and drag to make your lines. And when you click and drag, they aren't as exacting and precise as when you click, click, click. Thus the name, Sketch A Stitch. So one way or another, you guys, I hope you're enjoying your Sketch A Stitch. If you're wondering about training, if you visit the RNK Software Club and you look under the heading for software training and pull down the menu for Sketch A Stitch, I looked through there, and there are, I want to say, a dozen videos that will go kind of right from the beginning and go through some of the basics of how the program works and everything, how to open and all these things. But if you really wanted to get a sketch demo, that is my sketch demo. If you're wondering about the design, the grand opening, it's from a series of roses that I did for my embroidery club. If you're a member of the Trevor and Friends Embroidery Club, which of course you can join from any RNK or Floriani dealer, can help you join my club. But yeah, it was the roses are part of my season 2 of my embroidery club, if you're wondering where that came from. And in the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks very much for listening, and bye for now.